It is primary election night here in Michigan. Hello, everyone. I'm Juliette Dragus, joined by 13 on your side political reporter Josh Albertus, and you are watching live coverage of the 2026 Michigan primary election.
That's right, Juliette. A lot to cover tonight as the polls just closed moments ago in almost all of the precincts in the state, with results expected to start coming in over the next few hours. We will be tracking some of those biggest statewide and local races here in Michigan.
On the Democratic side of the primary, a hotly contested race for the party's nomination of the U.S. Senate candidate, with current Senator Gary Peters stepping down after this term. U.S. Representative Haley Stevens and former Wayne County Health Director Dr. Abdul El-Sayed are hoping to secure the Democratic nomination. Governor Gretchen Whitmer, also a Democrat, is finishing her last term in office this year. She is term limited. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson and Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson are vying for that Democratic nomination to fill that soon-to-be open seat in November.
And on the Republican side of the ticket, two GOP candidates are also hoping to capture their party's nomination in the race for Michigan's next governor. U.S. Representative John James and businessman Perry Johnson have competed in a heated campaign to secure that nod. We will also be watching incumbent U.S. Representative Bill Huizenga as he faces former mayor of Holland Phil Tanis in the GOP primary for Michigan's 4th congressional district. And two newcomers to politics, former TV meteorologist Terry DeBoer and businessman Ryan Cushman, are vying for the nomination in the 3rd congressional district, the winner of which will face the incumbent Democrat U.S. Representative Hillary Scholten.
And those are just some of the races we will be following throughout our live coverage tonight. We have crews at 4 watch parties in the Detroit area. 13 on your side's Nick Nelson is with Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. Jordan Hatfield is with Perry Johnson. Peter Elliott is with John James, and WTOL 11 Stephen Iwanek is with Haley Stevens. We're going to be checking in with all of them shortly. And we have a panel of experts also joining us throughout the night. Professor Emeritus of Calvin University, Dr. Doug Copeman, and CEO of Truscott Rossman, John Truscott. We'll also have Associate Professor at Johns Hopkins University, Dr. Danielle Leake, is going to join us virtually throughout the evening. First, though, we are going to check in with 13 on your side's Micah Cho. He is live at the county clerk's office in Muskegon County. And Micah was at a polling location earlier tonight in Walker. What's the turnout been like in Muskegon tonight?
Well, Julia, it's been such a busy night. We've been literally everywhere. We've been in at 2 locations in Walker, and then we decided to pay our friends a visit up here in Muskegon County. And I have County Clerk Karen Whitehead here with us. Karen, if you want to come in here real quick. Thank you for letting us come into your office.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so tell me, how busy have you guys been?
We've been extremely busy, and I'm really excited to see what the end result of our voting turnout is. I'm seeing even from the early voting that we had about 450 more people vote in our early voting process. Last time we had like 200 and some 200, and this time we have over 600 in the early voting. And talking with the cities and the townships, it sounds like we had a pretty good turnout. So we're really excited to see the end results.
Yeah, this is something that a lot of people have been obviously preparing for, right? Now tell me, is there anything that's really different than this year than maybe previous elections?
Well, the difference is every other year we do the early voting. So that consists of 9 days of early voting prior to the election. So it makes it a little bit more tedious for our clerks and our election workers. And I understand that Muskegon has kind of been on the forefront based on our president's last statement. So we're really excited. It's a good thing that he did mention Muskegon, because now we're in the forefront. A lot of people don't know where Muskegon is, but now they do. And we've had a really good turnout as far as challengers, election inspectors from both parties. So it really helps to increase the safety and security of our elections and making sure that our elections are held to the highest integrity.
Now, I wanted to ask because, so people that aren't really surprised tonight during, maybe around midnight, right? So what does Muskegon County kind of do differently than other counties in the state?
Well, we used to report as the results come in. But we've decided that to keep everything above board, so there's no questions about the numbers of votes that are turned in, we will report when 100% of the precincts have reported to us. They bring in their flash drives from their election totals, and then we upload them into our county system, and then everybody can see the election results. Hopefully, tonight it won't be a very long night. We're hoping that everybody can get all of their vote totals in to us, and hopefully by midnight maybe we can have everything uploaded into our system.
Now, you mentioned President Trump's comments from a few weeks ago. Tell me, have you guys had to bring in any more security to any either polling locations or ballot locations?
Absolutely, we have, because especially since he pinpointed the city of Muskegon, our clerk has experienced some situations where people in the public have threatened and made some very unnice type comments toward her based on what President Trump said. And so our election workers were a little concerned about anything happening in our polls. So thankfully, our Secretary of State and our Attorney General, Dana Nessels, sent security here. So at the city of Muskegon, there was actually security there from the state, and along with other security from our local law enforcement officers.
But overall, a good night for you guys?
It was a very good night. I was really pleased at very little reporting of any kind of infractions, people being too close to the polls or anything like that. So it was a very good night, no incidents, and the machines, we haven't had any problems reported to us, and so I'm really happy with the results. We have a very little, the polls are closed now, so we're just now waiting for the results to be brought in to us.
No, I'm assuming we're just going into after today, right? You guys are planning for November.
We will. Well, Thursday we'll begin our canvassing of this election, and our canvassers, both from the Republican and Democratic parties, will canvass the election and certify the election. And then the state will do their certification of the election. And then, we will start beginning to get ready for November. And we will have early voting again. That'll begin on October 25th and run for 9 days up until the election.
Absolutely. Anything else you kind of want to add about this very busy night that you guys are having?
I'm just really grateful, and I really want to encourage people. Primaries don't have the voter turnout that a general election does, but we're really hopeful that in November that our vote totals, I would love to see 60% of our registered voters come out and vote, or even more. So we're really excited about seeing how the election runs in November.
Absolutely. And we're going to be staying here in Muskegon County all night, so we'll let you know a little bit later on throughout the night how everything's going here. For now, Josh, I'll send it back to you. Studio in Muskegon, Micah Cho for 13 on your side.
Thank you, Micah. Well, it's no secret that we here in Michigan are under the national spotlight, but really, why is that? Well, we are really at a crossroads of a number of different statewide and local races that are going to have huge consequences one way or another, some on the national scale. Let's go first to the race for our open U.S. Senate seat. It's one of just a handful that are expected to determine control of the Senate for Democrats or Republicans. That in and of itself is a huge draw for local and national eyes, but the primaries happening tonight just add to that interest. Congressman Mike Rogers will be the only name in the Republican primary, but for Democrats, the fight between Congresswoman Haley Stevens, often viewed as the more moderate persona in this race, and former Wayne County health official Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, often seen as the more progressive candidate, is seen as sort of this embodiment of the larger national fight over the direction and identity of the Democratic Party, as we've seen sort of a wave of anti-establishment sentiment wash over places like New York and Colorado. We'll have to see how we may factor into that saga. Then you turn to another big statewide race for the governor's seat. Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer cannot run again under term limits. For Democrats, polls have shown Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson with large double-digit leads over Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson. On the Republican side, a lot more close, it seemed. Congressman John James has been hoping that the endorsement of President Donald Trump, among other factors, will propel him to a win. Meanwhile, businessman Perry Johnson Nelson is hoping momentum and in-state support will tip the race in his favor. And let's not forget, our entire state legislature and all 13 of our U.S. House seats will be up in November. So there are more areas and races that we're going to be watching, and we'll be digging into those throughout the next few hours. But we also have reporters on the ground at campaign stops throughout the night. First, we want to go live to 13 on your side's Nick Nelson. He is following the Abdul El-Sayed campaign in Detroit tonight. Nick, what are you seeing on the ground?
Yeah, Josh, just in about the last 15 minutes, quite a sizable crowd filed in to the Majestic Theater here in Detroit at Abdul El-Sayed's watch party. As a matter of fact, just moments ago, we heard a cheer, a very large cheer, come up from the crowd. They're watching TV coverage, and with a very small number of votes already in, Abdul El-Sayed is leading currently in that vote count. Now, I want to give you a look at kind of the crowd that's built up here. You can see a bunch of people, hundreds of people that have gathered here for the watch party for Abdul El-Sayed, who is the former Wayne County Health Director. He had previously run for the Democratic nomination for governor in 2018, ultimately losing that race to Governor Gretchen Whitmer. He's widely seen as the more progressive candidate, as you said, backed by the likes of Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. As a matter of fact, there were monitors here. He was at a campaign event earlier this afternoon in Dearborn with Ilhan Omar, Minnesota representative. Now, recent polling has shown El-Sayed could be the favorite to win tonight. Polls consistently showing here in the last few weeks about a more than 10-point gap against challenger Haley Stevens. Some of the issues he's campaigned on include Medicare for all and getting corporate PAC money out of politics. Now, as I said, we are monitoring some of these very initial election results that do show El-Sayed in front. As of right now, there's still plenty of vote to come across the state. We will keep an eye on what's going on here. As you can see, there are plenty of supporters. We're looking to speak to some of them as those results continue to come in. We'll send it back to you, but for now, reporting live, Nick Nelson, 13 on your side.
Now to Abdul El-Sayed's opponent in this Democratic primary, and that is Haley Stevens, Democrat, running for U.S. Senate to fill Gary Peters' seat. We want to go live now to reporter Steve Iwanek, who is at Haley Stevens' watch party in Detroit. Steve?
Well, Julia, good evening. We've talked about it all evening long. This has been a campaign that has sort of just been waiting to see if something big would shift away from what polls had been projecting for weeks now. If you take a look at some recent polls, including one that I've been studying for a couple of weeks now, the Emerson College poll that came out at the end of last month, it showed that Abdul El-Sayed really had a major advantage when it came to voters that were age 50 and younger. You look at the recent polling data, it showed that he had a plus 42 advantage with people in the younger demographic, versus if you analyze the data that showed people that were age 60 and older, Stevens had a significant advantage at plus 14. Now, you might be asking yourself, why is that the case? Well, really, it comes down to the whole ideological shift that could be seen here in this race tonight if Abdul El-Sayed is indeed declared a winner later this evening. It is traditional establishment-backed Democrat support that Haley Stevens has seen versus the progressive backing that we've seen for Abdul El-Sayed. Bernie Sanders, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, have given their support to the former Wayne County Health Director. While for Stevens, she's received support such as Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. Now, a big topic that came up on the campaign trail between the two candidates, it really was AIPAC, or if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. The Associated Press earlier today put out a report that Stevens' campaign has received around $30 million in backing for that campaign. It is a pro-Israel group, and in fact, it is the largest single ever investment in a single race, just to show that significance of what that means for a campaign. But it comes at a time, of course, when in global conflict, the Iran war has dominated the headlines and news coverage, and also for elections and campaign talking points. And Abdul El-Sayed has made it clear that he is against some of the actions that have been going on in the Middle East. He has called what's been happening in Gaza a genocide, and that really has spurred what has been seen as a massive wave of young people that have come out to the voting booths. So about an 89% increase from the presidential primary 2 years ago for in-person early voting in the state of Michigan. So he's been rallying up a lot of support, and for the Stevens campaign, they've just had to sit back and wait and see if They're typical suburban voters. Union households would come out in maybe about the same amount of way. So I'm curious to see as we go into the night and the numbers start piling in here, as we're only about 15 minutes since polls have closed. What do the numbers look like? Does Stevens stay close with Abdul El-Sayed, or will it be a pull away? Because as a lot of the recent polls have shown, El-Sayed has quite a big lead in the early polling compared to Haley Stevens. So we'll see what the camp says later today. But for now, here in Detroit, Steve Iwanek, back to you, Juliet.
Steve, thank you. Let's turn now to the governor's race here in Michigan and the Republican primary. John James and Perry Johnson running to get that nomination for November. 13 on your side's Peter Elliott is with the John James Watch Party in Sterling Heights. He joins us now with an update from there. Peter?
Hey, Juliet, good evening. Doors have opened here at the watch party for John James's campaign here at 7:30. So a steady crowd has already started to trickle in. We'll show you the assembly here. This is the headquarters of a trade association in Sterling Heights. You can feel certainly a more buoyant energy here. The polls, of course, have closed, but the advanced polls released a few days before have John James ahead of challenger Perry Johnson, pretty well ahead. Both candidates still hosting their watch parties in the greater Detroit area here. This is James's congressional district, so this should be a stronghold for him where he can really rack up the votes here. His district, the 10th, kind of encompasses both Macomb and Oakland counties. James is giving up his seat to someone else, and he is running for governor here. This is his third try at statewide office. He has run unsuccessfully in the past for U.S. Senate in 2018 and 2020. This time around, running for governor in a challenging year for Republicans. A lot of people expecting Democrats to outperform, given the approval rating of President Trump hovering somewhere in the 30s. But both of these candidates haven't shown that they care much about the approval ratings of President Trump. Everywhere you look here, you will see President Trump's face. He is, John James, proudly endorsed by President Trump. We have seen signs and images of him with President Trump on these signs behind us. You can see it on shirts as well. That is a major thing that he is running on. And of course, he has the endorsement. That's a big thing for candidates. If you don't have President Trump's endorsement, we have seen a lot of candidates around the country really flop when it comes to their electoral prospects. We have not seen the candidate just yet, John James, no sign of him, but plenty of other people rolling in here at this hour. You can, the polls, however, of course, looking really good for John James, given a solid lead. Perry Johnson has bankrolled much of his campaign to the tune of around $30 million or so, but that really has not hurt John James's prospects. He has, of course, a higher name recognition and, of course, those 2 terms in Congress that he is just coming off of. We will see what happens here tonight. You can also feel a lot of focus here tonight is on that U.S. Senate primary. So, of course, people are focusing and trying to celebrate John James here, but the cable news that is playing here is all they are talking about is the U.S. Senate race between Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens. We'll see what happens there. A lot of supporters for the U.S. Senate Republican candidate Mike Rogers as well. We've seen polos and shirts for him as well. The polls, again, for James look good. He spoke to a 13 on your side earlier this week saying he's not looking at the polls. He doesn't care so much about them when he was in Hudsonville. He's focused on what the actual voters have to say. They have just closed at this hour, so we'll have to see what the early returns say so far for this race. That's all so far for now here from his watch party in Sterling Heights. We'll have more updates throughout our streaming show this evening. Reporting live in the east side of Detroit, I'm Peter Elliott, 13 on your side.
Thank you, Peter. John James' opponent in this Republican primary is Perry Johnson, businessman. 13 on your side's Jordan Hatfield is with that campaign watch party live in Troy with an update.
Yes, Juliet, we are here at the San Marino Club where the room is filling up right now with supporters of Perry Johnson. Now, it is kind of a contrast, as Peter was saying. There's a lot of pictures of John James with Trump there at their venue. No pictures of Perry Johnson with Trump here, but a lot of his campaign signs. In fact, I've only seen one MAGA hat here, and I think Perry Johnson's really trying to highlight the fact that he is the outsider candidate, much like how Trump was himself. He is a businessman. He's not an established politician at this point, and he is hoping that platform helps rally sort of a grassroots movement around him by drawing also independents as well as other Republicans. One of his main campaign platforms is the mega audit of the state. He also wants to cut the state income tax, putting up $4,747 back into Michiganders' pockets. Another stance that he has made very firm here, he's also against data centers in the sense that he is advocating for a moratorium on data center development here in the state of Michigan. Now, we're here at Johnson's watch party, what he calls his victory party right now. He might be trailing in the polls behind John James, but he is still very optimistic that his independent movement as well as his outsider movement is going to carry him across the finish line. Now, we have not seen Perry Johnson at the event just yet. He has not spoken. We did catch up with him before around 5 o'clock, but we are unclear as to when he will be speaking here tonight at the San Marino Club. But we'll keep it locked here and be tracking the results and get them to you as soon as possible. For now, live in Troy, Jordan Hatfield, 13 on your side.
Thank you, Jordan. And we do have 3 experts with us tonight to help us on this election night understand what's going on, look at the numbers, look at the polls. One of them, Dr. Danielle Leake from Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Leake, you and I have been working election nights for many years, I think at least 20. You, of course, were at Grand Valley State University, an expert on social media. Tell us what you're looking at tonight.
Well, Juliet, it is true. We've been doing this for a long time. And I have to tell you, I have been online all night long watching to see what people in Michigan have been saying on social media as the polls were closing. It was great to see people calling out their friends and family, asking them to get to the polls and make sure that their votes were counted. And we heard that in that clip about what was happening in Muskegon, seeing the total number of people going to the polls larger than ever before. And I think what we're going to see is that the number of young voters this year was even higher than we've ever seen. I think you know that in Michigan, we have a new amendment that makes it possible for people age 16 and younger to pre-register to vote. And I'm really looking forward to seeing whether or not social media had an impact on whether or not those young voters got out and made their voices heard.
And Danielle, we will be checking in with you throughout the night to get more insight on the social media aspect of this election. Thank you, Dr. Leake. We'll see you soon.
Great.
Now we want to go back to political reporter Josh Albertus. And Josh, you're watching a couple of key counties now. What are you seeing?
Yeah, there are absolutely a few counties that really are key or seem to be key from historical precedents going into tonight, especially for those 2 big races, the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate as well as the GOP nomination for governor. When we go to the Democratic Senate candidates, we are really watching counties both on the West Coast as well as the East Coast. We are seeing things like Muskegon County. That is one that I am watching very closely in particular. You know, a lot of people are talking about how this may be sort of a referendum on President Donald Trump and his administration, whether or not voters here accept the direction that he is taking this country at the moment. Muskegon County on the presidential level had gotten smaller and smaller. It had been sort of a Democratic haven on the West Coast for a while through the 21st century. For many elections, Democrats had won there countywide when it came to the presidential election, but it got smaller and smaller of a margin until 2 years ago, President Donald Trump overtook Kamala Harris, and that was the first time in the 21st century that Muskegon went red for a presidential election. So I'm really taking a look at Muskegon County in particular because, you know, it really seems to be shaping up to be a bellwether in West Michigan, to be plainly honest with you, Juliet. When we take a look at Muskegon County and what it may signal, what the last results are signaling to us is that this is really a bellwether that every single vote for Democratic candidates you want to get out in Muskegon County. So if you win statewide as a Democratic candidate, but really tank in Muskegon County, that's a signal that you may have a lot of work to do when it comes to getting people out in a core base in what has really become a bellwether county. But that's not the only one. We are, of course, still watching Kent County. That's sort of transitioned in the last decade or so. You know, it really was a Republican fortress for many years in West Michigan. It has slowly transitioned itself, and Kamala Harris won in Kent County by about 5 points 2 years ago. So what we are watching there is whether or not a Democrat has consolidated support tonight going into November, whether or not the winner is able to take a large share of the Democratic vote and try and best ensure, in their view, that they have their Democratic base locked down and that they can branch out into other types of voters. So we are watching Kent County in particular as well because of its traditional place as a bellwether in the last few years. But we are also looking at the east side in counties like Oakland County, for example, also used to be a Republican fortress back until about the 90s, reportedly, but now it has transitioned itself into a very large Democratic base, and it is the home county of Representative, I should say, Congresswoman Haley Stevens. That is where her congressional district is. So if Haley Stevens hopes to have a good showing tonight, you would expect that she would want to have a good showing in the area where she is currently an incumbent congresswoman. But that's not the only one on the east side. We also see Wayne County, for example. For those not familiar, that is where Detroit is. It is really the bread and butter county of Democratic hopes in the state for any statewide election. It's not usually a question of whether Democrats will win Wayne County, but by how much, and can that offset some of the other areas in the state where Republicans tend to do much better? Will the winning Democrat tonight be able to consolidate support in a place like Wayne County, or will it be split? Will they have work to do there as well? And then really the fifth one that I'm watching, Washtenaw County. Home to U of M, home to U of M at Ann Arbor, a large young voter base where we have seen in the polls Abdul El-Sayed certainly tends to fare better than Congresswoman Stevens. If that, like Oakland County, we would expect Congresswoman Haley Stevens to do well. If Abdul El-Sayed would want to have a good showing tonight, he would want to do well in a place like Washtenaw County, whereas at the same time, 2 years ago, you look at the Democratic primary for president, there was a large groundswell in Washtenaw County for that uncommitted vote that was not voting for President Joe Biden in protest, in particular, of policies towards the conflict in Israel and Gaza, where foreign policy points seem to line up with a lot of the El-Sayed campaign. So is he going to do well in Washtenaw County, where it's not necessarily as populous as a place like Wayne County or Oakland County in terms of regular voters, but percentage-wise, is he going to be able to consolidate support there? He would want to do so if he wants to have a good showing tonight amongst his base. But that's not the only one we are watching as well. After we get past these results in Muskegon County, in the governor's race, in the Republican governor's race, many of these counties align with what I was really talking about already. Muskegon County, obviously, that bellwether, as I was talking about. Will Republicans similarly, will the winning Republican be able to consolidate support amongst their base there, or will they have work to do? Same thing in Kent County, as Republicans are really trying to, or in many senses, retake Kent County from many of the recent election cycles that we have seen where it has trended Democratic. It is still a very populous base. Grand Rapids, obviously, the second largest city in the state. Are they going to be able to consolidate support? They are going to want to, they are going to look to chip away, if they can, at a place like Wayne County. Do they have consolidated support there, or will there be work to do? Oakland County, Macomb County is the one that I switched, because Macomb County is the homestead of Republican John James. His congressional district is based in Macomb County, just like we would expect Congresswoman Stevens, if she wanted to have a good showing, she would do well in a place like Oakland County. But in Macomb County, that was where you would expect Congressman James to do well if he would like to have a good showing statewide as well. So those are some of the counties that we're watching, and we're really going to get further into some of those results, especially in Muskegon County, why it is such a bellwether. This is kind of just a preview I'm giving you right now, but we're really going to get into those numbers later in this stream and kind of explore those and what they may tell us. But for now, we're going to go over to Juliet, who will be speaking with one of our guests to get some expert insight. Juliet.
That's right. Now is Dr. Doug Copeman of Calvin University. Yep. Dr. Copeman, tell me about, let's start first with that U.S. Senate seat. Because the Democrats, the polls have been very interesting, and we have two very different candidates in a party that we wonder where it's going to go.
Yeah, the thing that comes back to me is 10 years ago in the Republican Party, when you had a candidate, Donald Trump, running against his own establishment as much as against the person in the other party, right? And you sort of feel that with El-Sayed, that he is running against the Democratic establishment as much as he wants to run against the Republican in November. And it'll be interesting to see, and Josh had made a good point about these different counties. Now, I would say the western Michigan County, Muskegon, they tend to be more labor union Democrats and more conservative or moderate or traditional Democrats. You'd expect Haley Stevens to do better. But if there's a wave for El-Sayed, how much does it go back all the way to Kent County and to Muskegon County too? Be an interesting thing to watch, right? But it is very much of a question within the Democratic Party. What are we going to be in the future? Do we stay the course and kind of keep the older guard, or is this a new generation with new issues, with kind of a whole different set of strategy and tactics than we've had before.
And there's so much talk about whichever candidate wins the Democratic primary, who can beat Donald Trump.
Right. Yeah, there is. I mean, and the National Democratic Party is looking at this for a couple of reasons. One, Michigan is a key state. Whoever wins the Michigan U.S. Senate race is going to have that party is going to have a leg up on control of the Senate. But also, if it's successful, if the El-Sayed and the progressives are successful, that's going to indicate to people running for president in 2028 what the strategy is within the Democratic Party. So it's almost hard to overestimate the significance of what happened tonight.
And I don't know, as you see, everywhere I turn today, whether it's online, social media, anything in print, radio, TV, it's all about the Michigan U.S. Senate Democratic primary tonight.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's partly there aren't many other shows tonight. There aren't many other states do it. So it's a big thing. But yeah, El-Sayed has had the younger generation or the more progressive generation of leaders in the Democratic Party here, Bernie Sanders, AOC, et cetera. And so they've welcomed the spotlight, and now here it is tonight, and we'll kind of see what happens.
So let's go now to the governor's race, because we also have two candidates. This has been it's been a hard-fought businessman, Perry Johnson, spending his own money for his campaign. John James, endorsed by President Trump.
Right.
What are we seeing with that tonight?
Yeah, it's been unusual. I mean, it's been unusual all the way through for the 5 or 6 months. We had 4 candidates for a while, and the early polling really had it evenly split between 3 candidates. Perry Johnson jumps in actually relatively late and ends up to be one of the 2 who lasts through the primary day. So it's always been a little bit uncertain. The one sort of constant is that Donald Trump has preferred John James. He went out pretty early, and the primaries, Republican primaries are still, at least statewide, are still competitions for who is most loyal to or who most connected to President Trump. And John James has been able to do that. Perry Johnson has been very assertive, very aggressive, spent a lot of his own money to be a viable candidate. And he is a viable candidate, but we'll see tonight if he just didn't quite make it.
And just in his recent campaigning here in West Michigan, Perry Johnson has been talking about being anti-data center, which is something very important to voters in West Michigan, really the whole state.
Yeah, the data center issue has come up in both parties, right? It's really sort of become the thing. And I think if you look at the facts and kind of dispassionately, if you can, at data centers, there's pluses and minuses, right? But right in the heat of the moment and in the heat of the campaign, it really has become a hot button issue within both campaigns.
I could sit here and talk to you for 2 hours straight, but I do want to talk more when we come back later about the state races and what's at stake here in the statewide election too.
Sure, we're happy to do that. I think, the state Senate and the state House are all up for this fall, and the kinds of candidates the parties nominate will make a lot of difference about who can win in November.
Okay, we'll get back to that shortly. Right now, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with more of Your Voice, Your Vote election night coverage. Welcome back to our election night coverage here on our streaming app, 13 on your side. We are starting to get a few results, and it is 8:40, so polls closed just 40 minutes ago. I want to show you, though, what we are seeing so far. Very little, as you can see. So we have, I believe that's the 3% reporting. El-Sayed is up 62% to Stevens, and McMorrow was still on the ballot. So you can see right now they've already counted 1622 votes for her, but this is very preliminary. We just want to give you an idea of what we are seeing right now so far. So let's look at the governor, the Democrat primary for governor. There we go, and there's Benson and Swanson. This is no surprise here so far, but once again, we have 3% reporting, but these polls have been far apart since the beginning. Let's move on now to the GOP governor's race. And John James ahead of Perry Johnson, 52% to 35%. Again, this is 2% reporting. Let's look now at some U.S. House numbers. Let's go to District 2, if we can, for Democratic primary. And you can see Jamie Hill is so far with 1% of the votes counted. But we want you to know that this is what we are seeing. We're showing you. And then there we go there with, those are the wrong pictures, but DeBoer and Cushman. And here's the U.S. House District 7, and William Lawrence is ahead right now. This has 10% of the votes counted so far. If we have any other numbers to show, if you guys will, my producers will show us that. Okay, so this is what we have so far for now, but as soon as we get more numbers, we will continue to update them so you can see what we are seeing. In the meantime, we have another expert we want to hear from on this election night. Political reporter Josh Albertus joins us now with John Truscott. Josh?
Thanks, Julia. As you mentioned, yes, I am joined by John Truscott, CEO of Truscott Rossman, a PR public relations firm. Thank you for taking time. We appreciate it very much. A large theme in a lot of what we're talking about tonight, we've mentioned it several times already, is this sort of back and forth between establishment and anti-establishment, that big wave coming that's been around there. Where did that really come from? I mean, what's your take on the groundswell of this anti-establishment efforts?
There is a frustration and anger among the voters that we haven't seen anything quite like this in quite a long time. Part of it's societal, part of it's just things going on across the country. It's the cost of goods, it's cost of gas, although I saw it down the street here on the way in at 370, so that's going the right direction. But people are just frustrated, and they're taking it out on their elected leaders, and they're saying, show me more, do better, and you have to give me a reason to support you.
And amidst all of this, I mean, these have been very bitter primaries that could leave the winners battered in the general, but voters could also be, tired. Things are going a mile a minute. I mean, what do you say to folks about why it may be important to stay engaged despite the fact that we're going so fast and there's so much to these primaries?
There is so much information flying around, and if you look at let's just use the Senate primary, Democratic primary as an example. El-Sayed has run a very non-traditional campaign, much more digital focus, a faster pace. I think Stevens has run a much more traditional campaign. That's her base. That's who she was going for. And the money that was supporting her, I don't think was very effective. It was the same message over and over again that El-Sayed is disrespectful to women. There was really nothing else there. What are your other arguments? So as you look at the two campaigns, El-Sayed had a lot of different messages, rapid fire, very digitally focused. Stevens was very traditional. And I think if Republicans are to win, they better learn to start talking like El-Sayed and match him with the number of issues, the type of issues, and the way people are communicated with, because he did a really good job reaching out to young people.
Well, you mentioned the word traditional. I mean, we would note that you served under Governor Engler as press secretary a few decades ago. I mean, how has campaigning as a whole appeared to have changed since you were in the thralls of it, if you were?
When I was doing it, we still faxed with the paper that kind of rolled up, and you take it to the printer and run it off. So it was a lot different. The internet was still fairly new as far as emails and things like that. So we are light years ahead of when I was doing it. But I still think there's an element, people want to know and trust their candidate. That's something that the Mike Rogers campaign has done really well. They've been out knocking on doors while all this has been going on the Democratic side. They have hit hundreds and hundreds of thousands of doors. I still think that has an effect. If you can talk to somebody, talk to a candidate or somebody who represents them, it has a lasting impression. And you're less likely to believe all the nastiness that gets thrown back and forth. So I do think there's an element where the old school shoe leather still matters, meeting people, being in communities, building that trust. But you have to, with the digital side, add that in. This is going to be a very heavy year as far as TV ads, digital ads, and things like that. I think it's going to be the most expensive race in Michigan history, and we'll see who can master it.
And you mentioned something very interesting. I mean, the attention around this race has centered around the Democratic primary. Meanwhile, as you mentioned, former Congressman Rogers hasn't had a primary opponent that he's had to get bruised. And I mean, I think it's not something that we could contest, but I mean, in your view as a whole, what is the advantage of not having a primary as opposed to what we have clearly seen in other primaries, regardless of party here in Michigan, that have been very active?
Yeah, you don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't get beat up. Your negatives don't go up. So you're starting in a much more positive position, and you have your organization in place and ready to go. I am betting they're ready to spring into action tomorrow, and we're going to see a lot of things unleashed. There was an interesting AI digital ad, or it was a post that came out the other day and playing on the movie The Odyssey, and it had El-Sayed in a Trojan horse. And so expect that theme to continue, kind of the wolf in sheep's clothing, the Trojan horse sneaking in, and then it had communism at the end. I still think we need to define or redefine what communism and socialism is so people can really understand it. But they have, I think, the digital chops to match what El-Sayed is doing. So watch out. This could be a campaign like we've never seen before.
And Governor Engler himself, I mean, has engaged in efforts to kind of encourage people essentially to tone down the temperature of our politics, especially as we've seen in these kinds of primaries, what's transpired here. I mean, do you feel that that needs to happen in our elections personally? Do you feel that way? And if so, how do you convince people to do it?
I personally absolutely do. I don't think it's probably very realistic to expect that. Political cycles are nasty by nature. They always have been, and I think now this cycle is probably going to be the nastiest we've seen. You know, I like it when people can debate and differ on issues and tell why and back it up. We haven't seen a lot of that in the different races that are out there right now. It's a little more name calling, a little more just throwing bombs, but we'll see. I think this is going to be a race where both on the gubernatorial and the Senate, debates are going to be really important. People are they want to see authentically who the candidate is, what they're about, not just what they're seeing on TV or on social media. So that first debate for each race, I think, will be absolutely crucial, and a lot of decisions will be made on that first debate.
Do you think people have had the chance to see candidates in that way up until this point, or has the noise kind of drowned that out?
I think it's been too noisy. I think the gubernatorial race may be a little bit more because we have people who jumped out in front. They've stayed out in front, so they haven't had to really mix it up and get really nasty. The Senate race is a whole different ballgame. But again, when you see an authentic candidate, and Mike Rogers has been doing this, talking to the camera. I saw an appearance that he did the other day where they were recording him talking. He was at the Coast Guard Festival, actually, talking to a cadet there about honoring service and how it was going to be a great experience for him, even though he was an Army guy. That was authentic. It was real, and it showed who he was. El-Sayed has been flashy. He's been kind of rowdy, noisy, and that has really ginned up the younger vote. They like that. He's connecting with them in a way. So we'll see what happens next, because I think you're going to have two very good, very aggressive candidates with probably the most watched Senate race in the entire country.
Any other predictions you feel like you'd want to share with our viewers as to either tonight or just down the road? I mean, what is it you've been in this arena for many, many years. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of things you expect?
I'm coming into this saying this is the future of the heart and soul of the Democratic Party. Which way are they going to go? Are they going to settle in and be more traditional? Are they going to continue going left and in the Bernie Sanders type wing? So that's really important to know what's going on. Does the Democratic establishment take back control? Don't know what's going to happen there. And so that's why this is so important, because it really is the future of the country and the way we're going. It's who controls the U.S. Senate. One interesting thing is there's a dissatisfaction with Trump at a certain level that you would say in a midterm election, the Democrats sweep everything. There might be enough people afraid of what El-Sayed will bring that they actually take a look at staying home or going for Republicans or crossing over back and forth. Michigan's a big crossover type state. Not as many straight party ticket voters as in other states. We tend to just say, hey, we're going to vote for the person. So do people take a new look because of what's going on at the Democratic Party? That'll be a key thing to watch.
Gotcha. John Truscott, thank you very much. Appreciate your time very much. And as well as we see the results coming in tonight, some of those results may be a little slower than others, but why might that be? I talked with a county clerk earlier last week to kind of get into what those checks and balances may be behind those sorts of delays. Take a listen to what he told me. It gets later and later in the night, and you may be looking for an answer as to how these races went before you go to bed. But that can take a bit of time.
The biggest thing to think about when you're looking at the time it takes for election results to come in is the number of checks and balances that are happening in this process. You know, when you go to cast a ballot in person on election day or early voting, you know, once you have left the precinct and at the end of the night, there are a lot of procedures and practices in place.
Something about Michigan is that its election system is what we call decentralized. That means these elections are carried out by officials across the state at the local level. They're all handling their own areas. That includes over 1,600 local and county clerks who are handling elections at the local levels, including like the one I spoke to this past week.
We have to go through those steps to ensure the accuracy of this process before we ever get to the results reporting. So we're emphasizing both, but obviously in a battle of speed over accuracy, accuracy is going to win.
You'll remember back in 2020, initial results in some cases were delayed for very long times in states that had huge mail-in ballot numbers during the COVID-19 pandemic. Clerks in Michigan can pre-process absentee ballots starting a certain amount of time ahead of Election Day, depending on how big the jurisdiction is.
They're verifying the signature has been verified. They're looking at the ballot numbers and verifying all that information. They're verifying the count of voters, and they are processing them through the voting machine, but they're not tabulating those results until the end of election night at 8 p.m.
But in any case, there is quite a bit to do before those results can get reported.
When voters vote by absentee ballot, there's a number of checks that go into the process that look a little bit different than when a voter is standing in front of an election worker and gets issued a ballot. There's actually more steps involved. They're ensuring that the signature area was verified. They're ensuring that the ballot number that's on the envelope, the absentee ballot envelope, matches the physical ballot in custody. And you know, they're taking the ballots out of that envelope, and there's a process that they do that to guard the voter's privacy and make sure that the same workers who are verifying ballot information on the front with the voter's name actually don't see the completely voted ballot.
So even if the results are taking time and something like mail-in ballots may be taking longer with perhaps different voting trends than in-person numbers that could get reported first, remember that the process takes time, and there's always a possibility that we won't have all the unofficial numbers or projected winners by the end of the night.
Josh Albertus, 13 on your side.
It is 8:53, and the results are coming in right now, slowly but surely. We want to go to the John James watch party where anticipation is building. 13 on your side, Peter Elliott is in Sterling Heights to tell us what's going on there, Peter.
Hello, Juliet. Anticipation certainly building in this room, filling up here in Sterling Heights. A much larger crowd since we last spoke with you earlier this hour. More people filling in. Rockstar by Nickelback playing. They hope John James is the rock star of this evening, beating Perry Johnson. Take a look out here at this crowd in Sterling Heights. I want to talk about something, Juliet, that you and Professor Koopman discussed earlier this hour about data centers. One of the most contentious issues across Michigan and the country. One of the rare bipartisan issues, too. A Gallup poll has found that 70% of all Americans disapprove of a large-scale data center being built near them. That is true for both Republicans and Democrats. Truly one of the rare issues. The two Republicans in this race have both been skeptical of data centers, but they've taken slightly different tacks in doing so. James has called for guardrails before data centers are built, saying he wants to have a plan before communities have a plan to make sure that communities are protected when it comes to pollution, electricity rates, and water usage. Perry Johnson, on the other hand, has called for a flat-out one-year moratorium on data center development. We have seen those in a number of communities in West Michigan. Perry Johnson also expressing concerns about power and infrastructure usage as well. We have seen Governor Gretchen Whitmer take a different tact while she is currently in office, unveiling a plan for what she calls a plan that would protect residents from higher electric bills if a data center would be rolled out in their community. Back in June, she spoke at a major groundbreaking for an Oracle OpenAI data center in Saline Township. And their opponent here, the presumptive likely Democratic nominee here in the governor's race, Jocelyn Benson, has also rolled out a similar sort of plan that would put up guardrails if a data center were to be built. But she has also faced significant scrutiny from her opponents, both on the Democratic side and Republican side, for perceived conflicts of interest. Her husband works for a company that was working to bring that data center to Saline Township. Her husband has since moved on to a different role in that company, but a lot of different approaches here to this data center debate that we have been covering so closely here on 13 on Your Side. President Trump, of course, at the executive level as well, has pushed out a number of executive orders related to data center development. He certainly has been very pro. So big fissures both in the Democratic and Republican sides related to data centers. We just told you last night about these developments in Lowell related to the data center there. We'll see what happens here, but certainly the governor, whoever takes office in Lansing, will have a major role in what happens with data centers coming whenever they take office. Reporting live here from the John James Watch Party in Sterling Heights, I'm Peter Elliott, 13 on Your Side.
Yes, Peter, you are right. Data center is definitely a big topic here in Michigan. We want to take you now to Detroit to another watch party. 13 on Your Side's Nick Nelson is with the Dr. Abdul El-Sayed party. And how's it there, Nick?
Yeah, Juliet, the crowd is very excited here as Abdul El-Sayed continues to lead in some of this very early vote count with about 6% of the vote in. You can see there are hundreds of supporters behind me in this crowd. Now, one thing that's been touched on earlier in this stream is Abdul El-Sayed's campaign on social media. Many have viewed this as a very critical part of his campaign, utilizing kind of the more traditionally known social media platforms, including Instagram and Facebook. But some of the newer platforms that have caught on in the last few years, platforms like TikTok and even Twitch streams, and with Abdul El-Sayed even appearing on a number of different podcasts in some of those streams as well. This has given the opportunity for Abdul El-Sayed to connect with younger voters who are more likely to use those kinds of platforms. Many have said that that youth vote here in Michigan could be crucial for a potential victory for Abdul El-Sayed tonight. And one of the things that a campaign that utilizes social media can do is reach beyond the bounds of Michigan in a state that's already been so closely watched by national eyes, many viewing it as very important for Democrats to take control of the Senate. We spoke moments ago with a woman and her granddaughter from Maryland who decided, based on hearing Abdul El-Sayed through social media, that they wanted to come campaign for him in Michigan and attend tonight's watch party. Here's what she had to say about the importance of this race.
So people are sick and tired of the Democratic Party. The Democrats are sick and tired of the Democratic Party. And so when you have, milquetoast Democrats, and especially in a time when the opposition is so strong and so clear, nobody's going to vote for you. And you have to, we're not stupid. We understand lies. We understand capitulation. And people like Abdul come across and they say, these are the facts. This is what's happening. We have a war that we should not be in. We are spending money supporting a war that we should not be in when this money should be at home. We are basically pawns of Israeli foreign policy. And all of those things are important. And what we have, mainstream Democrats who are scared of talking in that way, they're not going to get people excited about voting for them. And that's really matters.
And you could hear there kind of what a lot of supporters here at the Abdul El-Sayed camp have been saying, kind of that anti-establishment mood that a lot of Democrats are feeling, not only in Michigan, but nationwide. We are continuing to monitor results here. As we said, there are bursts of excitement here. We are continuing to follow that and hearing more from some of the people here that are here to support Abdul El-Sayed. But Josh, we'll throw it back to you.
Thank you, Nick. At the Abdul El-Sayed campaign in Detroit, we want to turn now to another one of our experts tonight. Dr. Danielle Leak is with Johns Hopkins University. She is a social media expert. Danielle, if you can hear me, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it very much. And I wanted to ask you a pretty specific question because we just heard from Nick at the El-Sayed campaign. Obviously, the El-Sayed campaign has been very active. It's tried to be on social media, but there's been a conversation whether or not social media engagement equates to engagement at the polls. So I wanted to ask you, what do we know, if anything, about what causes social media engagement to translate into voter engagement at the polls, and what doesn't make that connection?
Well, that's a great question. Well, we know that when the social media content is more partisan, that type of content is more likely to translate to voter turnout. So that was a study that was done by Harvard University. The most recent version of that research is from 2024. I expect that will be true again this year. And we can see that with the enthusiasm and the high sense of excitement that we're watching already this year. And we definitely see that with the type of content that the candidates are trying to produce and are producing well. So Al-Sayed is a really good example of a candidate who has done that well and has done that even by taking down some of the more partisan content that was up prior to this campaign. So I know that you've reported before on how some of his more controversial comments from 2020, well, the campaign made sure to take down some of that content. Even though it was engaging, it wasn't going to produce the kind of voter turnout that they were looking for. So the more exciting and partisan your content is, the more likely it is to drive turnout at the polls. So we'll see if that works this year at the end of the night.
So, I mean, what would you say is the give and take of using a lot of social media, both the potential positives and potential negatives of using social media a lot in an electoral campaign, especially ones that are so highly watched as they are here in Michigan? What are the pros and the cons, really, in general?
Well, I'll tell you, some of your experts have already alluded to this. I mean, once the primaries are over, a lot of that social media content that's already been used is still out there. So candidates are stuck with it. What you've said stays with you. So how you've been perceived in the primaries, you're going to have to stick with that as part of your authentic self throughout the rest of the election. And that can become a strength and a potential obstacle once the general election gets started. So if you can't win in this upcoming race using the same presentation of self that you had going in the primary, it can become a real challenge. So as many people have already said, and when we're talking about the Senate election, for example, if we see the outcome for Abdul El-Sayed, it could become a challenge if staying on the left side of the Democratic Party doesn't work in this general election. Well, we'll see the outcome of having that much social media content focused on those kinds of arguments really becomes a strength or a weakness. The same thing is true if you don't have that social media content out there. Trying to pivot and become a real strong supporter of a particular position, if you haven't been speaking out like that prior to a change in the race, well, it can become difficult to claim that you've always felt that way if you don't have a record showcasing that in the past. So social media is now the new way to establish what you believed before and what you're going to believe after certain times in an election.
And that last comment kind of leads into my next question, but as Juliet alluded to, you're a very familiar voice here at 13 on Your Side on this topic. So I would also ask you, I mean, how has the social media scene and its impact on elections as a whole, how has that changed since we really started tracking this, since the advent of social media?
Well, one thing that we've seen a lot of, especially in this race, and I know everybody that's watching is familiar with this, is the impact of artificial intelligence on social media content. I mean, we were just talking about the example of the commercial that included one of our candidates looking like they were part of the Odyssey. Well, that's just one example of the kind of content that can be created so quickly with the advent of artificial intelligence. So it's not just the fact that we can create content fast and content that looks really real and really good, but it means there's so much more potential for disinformation. And that's not just in advertising. It's even those of us who are voters who are seeking information and trying to find out where to go to the polls, how to go to the polls, who's winning the election. AI just creates so much more information so quickly. It can be hard for us to decipher what's truth and fact from what's fiction. And that has changed really, really rapidly from where we started with social media races back in the early 2000s. So we have a lot to watch out for as voters and citizens who are trying to make decisions about who the right candidate is for us. We're going to have to keep an eye out for that later this fall.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of expand on that if you would. I mean, what would you say to voters about the importance of being aware and, to the best of their ability, being able to distinguish the fake from the real, despite the fact that it's just everywhere these days?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's important for all of us to remember we're only human. And that means that all of us can make mistakes. So it's important for us to take an extra second to check things that are important to us. It's okay to be wrong, but it's not okay to not check the information that we have in front of us. It's a second check only takes 30 seconds, and that second check can make the difference between what we think to be true and what we know to be right. The second thing is to make sure that we have in our heads what are good sources of information. That's why it's important to have an organization like WZZM, a legitimate local news source that we can use as a verifiable source. We can always go to our local news or to a national news service to double check something and to really trust our gut. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. It's okay to wait to make a decision until we've had a chance to check what we think is real.
Dr. Danielle Leake with Johns Hopkins University, thank you so much, Doctor. Really appreciate your time tonight. For now, we want to take a quick break, but we're going to be right back in a moment with more live updates from the campaign trail, results as they come in, and expert analysis. You won't want to miss it. Stick with us. 9:15 here in the Lower Peninsula, and we have our first early major race call. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson has been called by the AP, projected to win the Democratic primary for governor, besting Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson. Now, this wasn't something that was entirely unexpected due to what we were talking about earlier in this stream when it came to the polls that we were seeing that saw Jocelyn Benson up with double digits over Swanson, and many of these polls very consistent. We are still in the early preliminary stages of these results being reported, but we do have sizable vote dumps out of, in particular, we got a large vote dump from Oakland County, a very strong Democratic base over on the east side, just north of Wayne County and Detroit. You see Jocelyn Benson is leading there by 85% with over half of the vote there counted. That certainly did play a factor because of how big Oakland County is as a Democratic base, but we also have smaller vote dumps from places like Washtenaw County, another Democratic bastion, not as populous, but still a lot of Democratic voters there. And in our own neck of the woods, Kent County, only about 20% reported. Those results are going to continue coming in, but at this point in the race, she is leading with 92.5% of the votes in Kent County, again with about 19% reporting there. We also have another race call in our neck of the woods here in the city of Grand Rapids. The first ward has been called for Lindsay Perez Pleasure. We are going to turn now to Juliet with more race updates. Juliet, what do we have?
It is 9:17. Polls have been closed for an hour and 17 minutes, and we are getting some more results in. So let's start with the U.S. Senate race and the Democratic primary. And, well, that's still the first word. We're going to get to the next one. That is Lindsay Perez Pleasure. As you saw, that is Ward 1, Grand Rapids City Commission. That is 100%. She has been called as the winner. Now let's move on to our other results, if we can. We'd like to start with the U.S. Senate. There we go. And right now, El-Sayed is ahead of Stevens, 53% to 44%. This is with 18% of the votes counted. Let's move on now to the GOP gubernatorial race. And there you see John James is taking a 51% to 36% lead over Perry Johnson. That is 12% of the precincts reporting. Now let's go to the U.S. House, and this is the 2nd district. And you can see here Ben Ambrose, 48%, Jamie Hill, 38%. That's only with 3% of the votes counted. And then let's look at District 3, the Republican race. And Terry DeBoer, meteorologist in Grand Rapids, former retired now, over Ryan Cushman, 78% to 22%. And that is with 4% of the precincts counted. And we want to go now to Haley Stevens' watch party. Steve Iwanek is there live, and he's going to join us now with an update on whether or not you have seen Haley Stevens yet. Steve?
Well, to answer that first question, no, we have not seen or heard yet from Haley Stevens. However, at the hotel that we're having this watch party at, as we continue to get those results in for you, you can see a lot of her supporters outside. They're kind of gathered around near a cocktail bar, charcuterie board, and there seems to be a pretty decent energy that's inside the main lobby areas of where we are at tonight. However, when you look at those numbers so far, early going, nearly 20% of the vote is in so far from the Associated Press, and it does show that Haley Stevens' opponent, Abdul El-Sayed, with a near 9% lead over her as those votes continue to come in. But this is what I wanted to talk about. So, of course, I'm not from the Grand Rapids area. I'm from Toledo, down there with WTOL across the border. And I know for Toledoans and Ohioans, we don't have a dog in this particular fight. But I did have a conversation yesterday with a political science professor at the University of Toledo, Dr. Sam Nelson. And we and I just talked about what the implications of this outcome could be if Sayed were to be the winner after tonight. And we talked about not just what it means for November this year, when it would be Mike Rogers and him if that scenario would play out, but what this means for 2028 and what this means for the Democratic Party as a whole. The ideological shift that we could see happen here today. It has been very proven so through at least early polling that a lot of Democrats in Michigan, a key battleground state for anybody that hasn't been paying attention to politics in the last few years, this is a big state for who decides big races in this country. A lot of the Democrats in this state and really across the nation have been seeking a new blue flavor, as I'll kind of describe it. They're tired, it's seemingly, of the establishment of the traditional Democratic way of campaigning and operating. They wanted something different, it seems, in a lot of the early polling, at least for voters under the age of 50. As I've referenced many times tonight, I've been referencing the Emerson College poll that showed that voters under the age of 50 favored Abdul El-Sayed by almost more than 40 percentage points, versus when you look at the Stevens campaign, where she has been really had her sweet spot is with the people 60 and over, plus 14 in the latest polling data that I looked at. So all that to say, the conversation I had with the professor at the University of Toledo, if this campaign goes in favor of El-Sayed, what you see is potentially this could set up a brand new landscape in Democrat politics, not just in Michigan, but in other big states. We've talked a lot in the national realm and even locally about the race that was going on in Maine, especially when it was Graham Plattner at the time as the Democratic candidate taking on Senator Susan Collins. But could that spark something different in who comes out in that race? We look at the Texas race with James Tallarico, a Democrat that's trying to flip what has been a very long tradition red state and the Lone Star state in Texas. And it's not just this year's races, but in Ohio, typically a red state. Does a progressive put their name out there for 2028 in any of those races? Does the outcome of this primary mean that kind of sparks something in the Democratic base in Ohio, and that leads to a different governor taking over, going from red to blue? Just those kinds of scenarios that we're yet to see if will be happening after tonight with what happens in this Senate race. However, it is very interesting to watch this race. We're in Toledo. We don't have anything close to Detroit, but to watch this race happen and have such shared economy, shared people, we have 2 counties of our own in our viewing area, and to hear the conversations from Democrats in those counties and saying, that a lot of people are tired of what they've seen in the past, it is just a big revolution. And it was referenced earlier in a conversation amongst the panelists there. Whoever comes out of this race for the Democrats, we are going to fully expect in Michigan a very heavy amount of money poured into television ads, into digital ads, social media advertising, trying to bring in as many young people as they can and spark potentially a new movement of voters to either side of the aisle. But here tonight at the Stevens campaign so far, going back to where I was at the beginning, we have not heard from her yet. We have not seen her yet. None of her supporters are actually down here in front of the stage yet. They're all hanging out in the hotel lobby area. Seems to be an upbeat energy, but as those polling data shows, so far the Stevens campaign playing from behind tonight. So we're going to have to see some of the big counties if they start becoming a stronger hold for her, or if it's more of just a 50-50 split and El-Sayed is able to pull away in some of those smaller counties and really make a big statement tonight in the world of state politics. So that's all I have for you. We'll continue to keep you updated with all the latest information as we have, and as soon as we hear from the Stevens campaign on if and when she'll be speaking, we'll let you know as soon as we can. Back to you guys.
Now, all that knowledge just came from reporter Steve Iwanek. He is with our Toledo sister station, also covering that race for us tonight and providing a lot of insight. We want to go back now to the GOP gubernatorial race. We have 12% of the Associated Press votes counted. John James, 51%. Perry Johnson, 35%. 13 on your side's Jordan Hatfield is at the Perry Johnson Watch Party in Troy. And what's the mood there, Jordan?
Well, Juliet, the mood really hasn't seemed to have changed too much since the doors opened here at 7:30. The crowd here still seems pretty cheery, still seems pretty optimistic. They've still been rolling out food. The bar's still open here, so plenty of folks still seem pretty optimistic about the night. Perry Johnson himself still very optimistic about the night. When we spoke to him at 5 o'clock, we still haven't seen him here. We did speak with a member of his team. They said that Johnson will not be coming out until there is a definitive result, which could still be coming in several hours from now. But like I say, John James is currently leading the pack right now in the race, and Perry Johnson is trailing a little bit behind. Perry Johnson still hopes that his outsider stance as a businessman will carry him across the finish line, but still it seems like the gap might be a little too wide here, but we still don't know yet. Only 6% of precincts are reporting right now, but still, moods here still seems pretty optimistic in Troy, Michigan at Perry Johnson's so-called victory party. Now, we'll hopefully hear from Perry Johnson very soon here, but for now, back to you, Juliet.
All right, Jordan, thank you for that live update. We want to go back now to our political reporter, Josh Albertus, because we've been looking at counties specifically. And Josh, I want to talk more about Muskegon County tonight.
Yeah, and there's a big reason for that, Julia. That's because Muskegon has sort of established itself, seemed to establish itself anyway, as sort of a bellwether now. Very different than it was even just a couple decades ago. And in kind of coming to that conclusion and trying to figure out what the scene was there, our team really crunched the numbers on historical data from Muskegon County and on a number of different levels. Now, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of people may see this as sort of a referendum this August and November as to President Donald Trump's administration and his direction, whether or not voters approve of the way he is taking this state and this country at large. So I wanted to start with some of the most telling on the presidential level in Muskegon County, dating back to 2000. All of these are the presidential margins of victory in Muskegon County. You notice there's a lot of blue on here. Throughout the 21st century, it was really established itself as sort of this blue dot in West Michigan, even before Kent County had really tried to start its transition there from 2000. And then you kind of hit a peak in 2008 when Barack Obama first campaigned for president and won a very, very large margin in 2008. But then you notice it gets smaller and it gets smaller and it gets smaller into 2020 when it's only 0.5% for President Joe Biden. And then in 2024, as Donald Trump carried the state, he also carried Muskegon County. First GOP presidential candidate to do that in the 21st century, and by a comparable margin to his overall statewide margin. So it really has aligned itself with what we've been seeing. And that's why we call it sort of a bellwether, why we are seeing what we were seeing. I mean, when you get into the other levels, it may be more of a mixed bag when it comes to the different trends that we've seen, like when you go to the governor's level in Muskegon County. You notice back when John Engler ran in 1998, that was a very large Republican win there, but there were special circumstances in that race. And then 2010, you saw Rick Snyder won Muskegon County, but that was amidst a wave of larger, particularly the more congressional, the Tea Party tailcoats, if you will. But the rest of this was very aligned with what we saw as Muskegon County earlier in this century as that little Democratic island, if you will. But then this is really just backed up by Senate results. I mean, you see all of that blue through Senate results all the way from 2000 up until 2018. You had those large margins of Democratic victory in Muskegon County, but then you saw in 2020 very narrowly shifted for the GOP. And then in 2024, Mike Rogers, former Congressman Mike Rogers, when he ran against Alyssa Slotkin, 0.05% win for Mike Rogers in Muskegon County, and that was very comparable, as you remember, to the difference that made up Alyssa Slotkin's victory. Mike Rogers may have carried Muskegon County, but just over the tip was Alyssa Slotkin's victory statewide. Very, very narrow margins there. So the historical results of Muskegon County lead us to, it really suggests to us that what happens in Muskegon County, including in these primaries, including in this general election in November, are going to be very, very important to watch, especially as I mentioned earlier in this stream. I mean, particularly for the Democratic Senate candidates and those contested races like the governor's race for the Republican Party, whether or not tonight we will see this consolidated support around the winner, whoever comes out on top of that Senate primary as well as the Republican governor primary. Will they have consolidated support, or will they start at, what some may view as a disadvantage in a place like Bellwether, Muskegon County, where they may have won statewide, but they really tanked in a place like Muskegon County and have to really get to work making up those lost votes in a very critical region like Muskegon County, where they will need every single vote these historical trends suggest to win in such a key region like Muskegon County. So we're going to be seeing what happens, as Micah mentioned there in his live report with the county clerk in Muskegon County. They are not going to be releasing those unofficial results from Muskegon County until they are 100% in. So we have not seen any of those results yet, and they may be some of the more later results of the night. But as soon as those come in, we are going to see all at once whether or not those winners of statewide races, if they've been called yet, have that consolidated support, or if they have a lot of work to do. But for now, I'm going to send it back to you, Juliet.
And Josh, as we just told everyone just a short time ago, one of the races that has been called, that we have seen the results, is the Democratic gubernatorial, and that is Jocelyn Benson has been called as the nominee, Michigan Secretary of State. She beat Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson. Now, once again, she is the Secretary of State, and voters casting their ballots today may have noticed that some of these positions, like Secretary of State and Attorney General, were not listed. Josh explains why some statewide races are not on the primary ballots.
Why do you do what you do with this organization?
I wish I knew. I just feel compelled. Like I can't stop myself. And honestly, it's just me right now. I don't have any other staff.
Meet Krista Moon, running her own voter education organization, Michigan Women.
The whole purpose is so that we can vote with knowledge and confidence.
So she aims to use her background in marketing and research to try and find details about topics, including one that not everyone may know about, but is central in the state's 2026 midterms.
We just don't even realize that we, general population, hasn't chosen those candidates. The parties selected them for us.
She's referring to the process by which major parties select many of their November nominees for office. While nominees for certain offices like state legislature are chosen directly by voters in the August primary.
Governor is the main one. We have Senate and federal offices.
For others, it's a little more complicated.
Campaigns that are done at the convention level through precinct and district delegates.
Here's how it works. The candidates that major parties put on the November ballot for offices like Secretary of State, Attorney General, and State Supreme Court are made by delegates to each party's state convention.
One of 6 states that does not have primary elections mandated for every statewide elective office.
Delegates to that state party convention are chosen by delegates at county conventions.
In the party primary in August, you vote at the way down at the bottom of the ballot. You select a precinct delegate to represent you at the local county party convention, and those people elect delegates to go to larger conventions.
While layered and maybe a bit complicated, it's a system that remains what some see as a vital piece of voter education and involvement.
We want to go back to the Lakeshore now, as we just heard Josh explain a short time ago the significance of Muskegon County in the election. 13 on your side's Micah Cho is live at Muskegon City Hall. And Micah, we heard from you earlier, and the county clerk said there have been no problems so far in tallying the votes.
Yeah, no problems indeed. We kind of moved away from the county's office, so now we're here at the Muskegon City Hall, and behind me is the receiving board. So I mean, probably 40 minutes ago, there was only 2 people sitting at the table there. Now, I mean, there's half a dozen, if not a dozen people, going over. This is where when precincts come in, when ballots come in from precincts, they go straight to this table here. They're doing their reviews as required. And talking with Karen Whitehouse, the county clerk, earlier today, just about an hour ago, she was telling us that, and Josh, I know you mentioned this earlier before too, that these results won't come in until everything is tallied up. So results really won't come in throughout the night here in Muskegon County until all the results from all the precincts, again, are tallied up. I talking with White House about an hour ago. She said that even they've had to hire a little bit of extra security, especially from the state, especially after President Trump's comments not too long ago, maybe about 2 weeks ago, talking about possible voter registration fraud. Here's Karen kind of explaining what that security looked like.
Election workers were a little concerned about anything happening in our polls. So thankfully, our Secretary of State and our Attorney General, Dana Nessels, sent security here. So at the City of Muskegon, there was actually security there from the state, and along with other security from our local law enforcement officers.
We're able to get a little bit of video. We'll bring that up later. Because of rules, we can't go live down there. But again, very busy here in Muskegon County. We'll send it back to you, Josh.
Thank you, Micah. We want to crisscross the state now, and we want to go to 13 on your side's Peter Elliott, who has been at the John James campaign party tonight. Peter, I mean, these early results suggest a large lead so far for John James. What's kind of the mood there as these results are coming in?
They really do, Josh. This crowd is picking up on those early results. You can see people checking their phones and feeling pretty good here about how it's looking for John James. It's exactly what the polling suggested, that he would have a pretty overwhelming lead over Perry Johnson. You can feel the mood lifting up. We were told that there could be a call coming in here at some point. We are expecting John James to potentially be up here on this stage in the next perhaps 45 minutes or so, giving what could be a victory speech. John James looking increasingly likely as the Republican nominee for governor here in the state of Michigan. This is going to be the podium where he will be speaking at. You can see the placard right here that says pretty clearly, "Stop Socialism, Save Michigan." He's not facing progressive Abdul El-Sayed in this race, but you'd be forgiven for thinking so, because a lot of Republicans have been running against El-Sayed's message here. So much of the focus here, even at this rally, has been on the U.S. Senate primary between Haley Stevens and Abdul El-Sayed. Of course, those watch parties happening elsewhere in Michigan, but that's a real focus. A lot of the Republicans painting Democrats as far left and radical. That's something that John James has done throughout this campaign, even though now we know he will be facing Jocelyn Benson, the former Secretary of State. She is far from the kind of progressive that Abdul El-Sayed has been. We've been talking with voters here. They've said a similar thing. They rejecting socialism. They say voting for John James is a repudiation of that. We've been speaking with voters. I want to share with you a clip. We spoke with one voter. His name is Marcus Bowman. He is a school board trustee in the city of Pontiac. He knows James personally, has spoken with him in the past. He says he has been a good representative for his constituents in Congress, and pointed to specifically his experience as being the reason why he voted for him today.
Experience, learning the playing field, understanding the people, understanding the needs and the concerns of what, the Michiganders need right now, and the climate that America is in. We're at a great point right now with great leadership in the White House, and we're just trickling down to the State House, where we're going to do some big things with John James under his leadership.
John James could be putting his political career on the line here. He is giving up a seat in Congress here for the governor's office here. That is a pretty big move here. Also seen nationally too, giving up a pretty swing district here right on the east side. But it looks like right now there are staffers who are getting ready for John James to potentially take the stage as we look at these early results that have come in, all favoring John James and his race against Perry Johnson. We could be seeing a pretty major call in this race shortly. We'll keep you posted when we do, and certainly when John James takes this stage, potentially in the next couple of minutes as the presumptive, likely Republican nominee for governor here in the state of Michigan. For now, reporting live in Sterling Heights, I'm Peter Elliott, 13 on your side.
And as soon as there are any developments, we will go back live to Peter. Thank you. Right now, though, I'm with John Truscott, our expert analyst, and you have been watching everything. Anything that you notice that stands out to you right now as the results are coming in?
A couple of things, a general level of excitement, a general level of fear, kind of all mixed up into one. There have been a lot of things that have not made it out in the public yet, and they're starting to hit online, digitally.
Okay.
Challenges to candidates, things that they've said in the past. But I think the one thing that I've been watching is, as there was kind of a fear, is there going to be a problem with the election system? It's operating exactly as it should.
So we haven't seen anything. I know why we've been watching here locally. We heard the Muskegon County clerk say there have been no problems at all.
Yeah.
We haven't seen anything.
I'm really glad to see that. We're doing some work for a group called Pillars of the Community. They're active in a number of states. Well, what we do is go and recruit respected people in the community, people that are trusted, and say, come in and inspect the system, take a look, pressure test it.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, now's the time to do it. Be skeptical. And what we saw, especially here in Kent County and the city of Grand Rapids, did an event about 2 weeks ago, and they showed how the whole system works. It was a great display of how things work, how it's supposed to go, and how they fix problems if they do crop up.
And that really does affect the mood of the electorate.
It does. I think it reinstills faith that people have in the system. Hopefully it'll encourage them to go vote in the general election and have faith that the results are what they say they are.
Okay, now let's go back to the results that we're hearing now, the U.S. Senate and then also the gubernatorial race for the Republican. What is your take on this?
El-Sayed has been kind of the ringleader, the front runner the whole time. I've been seeing some stuff tonight that the Stevens campaign put out of supporters in Detroit saying really good things about her. It's like, why didn't we see that during the campaign? It's really good testimonials of Detroiters of things that she had done for them. So I think her campaign missed the mark, and El-Sayed ran a pretty darn good campaign.
And we talked about social media and also his influence on younger voters as well. But, as we're seeing the numbers come in, we'll find out.
Yeah, and the thing is with that digital, your algorithm gets in a certain way feeding you information that's just reinforced time and again. So I would encourage people heading into the general, take a broader look at other sources that are out there, and really educate yourself on the candidates.
Just like we heard Dr. Leek saying too, our expert on social media. Okay, right now we want to go back to the Abdul El-Sayed watch party right now. 13 on your sides, Nick Nelson is there live. And Nick, what's going on there?
Yeah, there are still a lot of supporters that are here on the floor that are excited. There have been a number of speakers as well. I'm going to step out of the frame so you can take a look at some of the crowd that is gathered here. You can see hundreds of supporters here. We were just looking at some of the monitors here. Twitch streamer Hassan Piker is here, has been going live on various platforms here, as you know. He's been sort of a controversial figure in the Abdul El-Sayed campaign, appearing on, with Abdul El-Sayed appearing on several streams with him. We've talked about kind of that new media, that new social media energy that the Abdul El-Sayed campaign has really tacked onto throughout the campaign, particularly in these last few weeks, with several polls showing him actually pulling ahead of Haley Stevens. We're hearing another cheer now. I believe that's for some congressional seats here in the Detroit area. A lot of races that some of these folks are very excited about. And as we've seen, there have been a number of speakers that have been here. A representative with the UAW spoke a few minutes ago, as well as somebody, I believe, at the Michigan Nurses Association. So a little bit of that union support for Abdul El-Sayed, as well as we continue to wait on some results. We've got some results in about 22% of the vote. Abdul El-Sayed is leading, but it should be noted that since it's come back to us, Haley Stevens has narrowed the gap a little bit here. So we are going to continue to monitor what's going on here with the numbers in Detroit. And as soon as we hear from more speakers, or even hear from the candidate himself, whether he wins or loses tonight, we will bring that to you. Reporting live, Nick Nelson, 13 on your side.
Nick, thank you for that update. And once again, we do have reporters at every single campaign watch party in the east side of the state. As soon as there are any developments, we're going to go right live to them so we can keep you updated, as well as the latest results. But right now, we're going to take a quick break, regroup. We'll be right back. It is 9:50 on this election night as results continue to come in. We want to look at some of the latest numbers we are just receiving. Let's look at the U.S. Senate, the Democratic primary. El-Sayed still ahead of Haley Stevens, 52% to 45%. This is with 23% of precincts reporting, so we are getting more numbers in. Let's look at the gubernatorial GOP race as well, and the latest numbers on that. There we go. John James still ahead of Perry Johnson. This is with 17% of the reporting precincts, 51% James, 36% Perry Johnson. And then we have a local race we want to tell you about that has been called. The GRPS Sinking Fund millage has passed 63% to 37%. Now let's get back to political reporter Josh Albertus, who has some information county by county for us right now.
Yeah, Juliet, we're starting to get those county by county results in from the Associated Press. A lot of colors are being filled in on the Michigan map here, so let's get into it as we're getting these first results. As we were expecting, one of the darker shades on this map, the purple, represents Abdul El-Sayed leading in those counties. The green, or the teal, represents Haley Stevens leading in those counties at this time. But we are still early in the race. Results are still being reported, so these colors could change. But this is what we are seeing right now. As we kind of predicted, one of the darker shades for Dr. Abdul El-Sayed is in Washtenaw County, with a very fair amount of the expected vote in, 65% there. Abdul El-Sayed leading with about 64% of the vote. Like we said earlier, this would be, sort of somewhere we would expect Dr. Abdul El-Sayed to do well if he wanted to see a good showing statewide. University of Michigan at Ann Arbor, a younger voter base where Abdul El-Sayed has tended to do well, much well compared to Congresswoman Stevens in the polling, as well as that larger share of uncommitted voters a couple of years ago in the presidential primary for the Democrats, with President Joe Biden running there, with a lot of people voting against essentially his policies towards the conflict in Israel and Gaza, which has aligned pretty much with Abdul El-Sayed and his campaign's message on foreign policy. So we do see one of those darker shades in a place like Washtenaw County, but then we move over to the north of Wayne County, Detroit, Oakland County. Like we said earlier, this is the home ground of Haley Stevens. Her congressional district is based here, so if she wants to have a good showing statewide, you would expect her to do well where she is currently the incumbent. She is leading in a place like Oakland County with about 67% of the expected vote in, but not by much, about a couple percentage points there. We're going to have to see if that changes, but we are, of course, also watching all-important Wayne County, home to Detroit and the biggest expected voter base of the Democratic Party by far. Very, very few results in so far there. 4% of the expected vote, with Abdul El-Sayed currently leading there, but it could make all the difference depending on which way Wayne County swings as they get more results in. But you notice these colors, it's just, a flat surface. But like we're saying here, Wayne County, a lot of results not in. These gray bubbles, they represent the expected amount of votes that have not been counted yet. And you see in Wayne County, by far the largest bubble that we are expecting to see Democratic votes come in, and what that may do to the race. So still a lot to be seen. If you look at what has been counted so far, you may have seen many of those colors on the map a second ago, but when it comes to the actual votes that have been returned, very, very few in a lot of these counties outside of a place like Oakland, outside of a place like Washtenaw. And we are getting some results in from Kent County. About a quarter, 23% of the expected vote has been counted, with Dr. Abdul El-Sayed leading at about 53% there. That's the state of the race when it comes to the U.S. Senate primary for Democrats. We are, of course, also watching the governor's race for Republicans. You remember earlier in the night, Democratic Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson was called by the Associated Press, projected to win the Democratic nomination for governor. But when it comes to the Republican nomination for governor, we are still seeing that work its way out. We are seeing a lot of red on this map. That is representing where Congressman John James is leading at the moment, and that greenish, yellowish color is where Perry Johnson is leading. And like we were getting a lot of votes out of of Oakland and Washtenaw for the Democratic primary so far. In Senate, we are seeing a similar picture when it comes to that outer ring of counties outside of Detroit in the governor's race so far. Oakland County, about 62% reporting. Congressman James is ahead with about 52% of the vote there. In his home county, is this home congressional county of Macomb. He is currently leading with about 52%, but a lot of vote to be counted there is expected. In a place like Washtenaw, he is also leading, but you want to go to the uncounted votes again. All of those are uncounted votes that we are still waiting to see how this race shapes up and how all of these bubbles could factor into the race and tip it towards one side or the other. So still at this point, pretty early stage in the race, but we are going to keep watching those results. But for now, Juliet, we are going to go back to you with one of our in-studio political experts for more insight on these races.
Josh, I'm with Dr. Doug Copeman, and we have been watching all these numbers, a lot to digest there. But let's talk specifically about the U.S. Senate Democratic primary. What are you seeing?
So you're seeing the county by county things are very interesting things. But think about what's within each of those counties. If they're counties of higher education, University of Michigan there, El-Sayed is doing well. So I would want to you do a regression, as the political scientists talk about, is that the educational level of each county or every city, and my guess is the higher the educational level, the more graduate degrees and things like that, the better El-Sayed does, which is a little bit of a description of the new Democratic establishment is the well-educated, social scientists, those kinds of people that he is doing well with. But then you look at working class, Haley Stevens still has some strength there. And the counties, out counties, she's winning those out counties by a little bit. Now most of those counties don't have a large population. Wayne County to me is the wild card.
Yes.
Does Haley Stevens keep her margin there? What happens to Wayne County? Because that's a boatload of Democratic votes in Wayne County. And if she can get a large enough margin there, that can help her out as she's losing a little bit to El-Sayed in these higher education counties where universities are. So that's an interesting thing to me. So even the demographic subgroups of the Democratic Party.
And that's something we'll be analyzing for a long time. Also, there is a race in the Lansing area that you've been talking about that you're watching.
There is, and it's been on people's radar for a few weeks, but it's the Democratic primary to run against Tom Barrett, the Republican. It's the 7th U.S. House District. And there are 3 viable candidates who seem to be about equal in the polls. And the early returns tonight have the most progressive candidate, who's the leader of some of these grassroots groups on the progressive side, has about 40% of the vote, and the other 2, including Bridget Brink, who is an East Grand Rapids native, are getting about 30% each. So I'm really looking at that to see one dynamic is you have a couple of mainstream or establishment candidates, and you have one, an outlier sort of candidate on the progressive side. Those are the places that the progressive candidate is winning. Is that a pattern that we're seeing statewide? And I think it probably will be a pattern if it's a multi-candidate primary.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about social media, because we have it's been a big topic tonight, and it's really been important in this election.
It has been very important, and there is this sense of, if you're just watching TV, you're not getting enough, and if you're doing a few Facebook things or whatever, that's probably not even enough anymore. But so much of the energy is these self-selected, very narrow-minded groups, and then it's the coalition of these narrow interests who rally around a candidate. So you're putting together a collection, a hodgepodge of issues that maybe not collectively actually logically have to be together, but that's how people are winning. They're putting together a bunch of these smaller grassroots networks, and they all agree that this is the outsider who's going to change things up, which it seems to be the change thing up from the grassroots night.
And something that Dr. Leek, our social media expert, had mentioned earlier is that what they put on now, though, is going to stay with them all the way through the November election, really forever.
The thing about social media is that's forever. You can go back, the Wayback Machines, you can capture things, and so whatever you said will be found, and the most embarrassing thing will be put in the most embarrassing light for a lot of these candidates. And that'll be a new challenge. That typically doesn't really happen in primaries. You don't have enough time, you don't have enough talent, you don't have enough money to make that happen. But now we have 3 months until the general. And what people have said or posted or liked or disliked is going to come back to haunt them. And then we'll see what happens.
Any other observations tonight as you are looking at numbers and looking at the various races tonight?
Well, I think it's great news for people worried about Michigan election security and safety and authority, and is it working well? It seems to be working well statewide. The county clerks and others have seemed to have really done their business and really done, educated people, brought people in to show what's going on. That hey, this is a system that works really, really well. So I think we should give a shout out to the county clerks and all the clerks across the state who've done a superb job, it looks like, so far.
And every single clerk that we have talked to says, come and see how it's done. We want to show you. Become a volunteer. I have a friend who became a volunteer because he wanted to see how it's done. And now you really understand our process and how well run it is.
Yeah. Once you go see it, you really see all the checking, the double checking, the bipartisan checking, every step of the way, and that they are secure. They're good. I mean, people make mistakes, and people, fraud tries to happen, but people catch almost all of it. And we have very well qualified people, and that's working well.
And that's something that the viewers and the voters need to be assured of. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Copeman. We've been talking a lot about the nationwide importance of Senate seats, the U.S. Senate seat, why there's so much attention on it. Here's an explainer as to why.
I'm Abdul El-Sayed. I am running for U.S. Senate.
I want to make sure that we are heard at the lawmaking table.
If you've been tuned into election season here in Michigan, there's a pretty good chance you've been hearing a lot about the Democratic primary for our open U.S. Senate seat. Former Congressman Mike Rogers is the only Republican whose name is appearing on the ballot in the Republican primary. But the Democratic race has caught huge national attention. So, why might we be hearing so much about it? For a number of reasons, actually. Right now, the chamber is split 47-53 under a Republican majority, and Michigan is one of just a handful of battleground states that are being watched to see which party will control the tightly split Senate. Couple that with the battle for the identity of the Democratic Party, which really seems to be summed up in this race, and you've got all eyes on the Great Lakes state. Congresswoman Haley Stevens is widely seen as the moderate persona in the race. Names like Governor Gretchen Whitmer, former Senator Debbie Stabenow, and Senator Gary Peters, whose seat is at stake here, have endorsed Stevens to replace him. And then you got the other side. Former Wayne County health official Dr. Abdul El-Sayed has emerged as what many have seen as the progressive candidate. He's gotten the backing of names like Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, and New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The past statewide contests that have featured major progressive pushes really have seemed to be a mixed bag here in Michigan. Sanders eked out a win here in 2016 in what was a really big upset at the time in the Democratic presidential primary over Hillary Clinton, but Whitmer won over El-Sayed just 2 years later in the 2018 Democratic primary for governor by double digits. Dynamics may very well have changed a lot since then, so we can reference those, but whether they bear any clues or suggestions as to now is totally subjective. So how the current environment may play into who is the victor here is something we are waiting to see.
Thank you for that explanation, Josh. We are hearing that there is some activity at the watch parties on the east side of the state. We have 4 reporters there at the different candidates' parties. We're going to check in live with them right after this. It is 10:09, and the numbers continue to be counted on this primary election night. We want to take you live to the east side of the state. Our Jordan Hatfield is at the Perry Johnson watch party. And Jordan, what's going on there?
Yes, Juliet, there's somewhat of a vibe shift here at Perry Johnson's watch party. We were told that Mr. Johnson will be making a speech within 20 to 30 minutes. Roughly 30 minutes ago, they're hoping to see about 20 to 25% of the results in before they make that call, before he comes out. But right now, yes, the music has gotten a lot less rollicking. It's now a bit more somber, and the open bar has now turned into a cash bar. So things definitely showing signs that the mood might be a little sadder coming up here at Perry Johnson's victory party, that so-called victory party, now turning into a watch party. But still plenty of people hanging around here. Some have trickled out, but a lot of the supporters here are holding firm. They are going to stay here until Perry Johnson comes out and says what he is going to say. Hopefully he will be getting on stage here very soon. Here we'll be able to hear in his own words what comes next for his campaign and what will happen when one of either Perry Johnson or John James goes toe-to-toe with Jocelyn Benson come November. So a lot of questions here. Hopefully we'll get some answers to you soon when Perry Johnson comes out. We don't know when that will be. Hopefully soon here. But for now, back to you, Juliet.
Thank you, Jordan. Of course, Perry Johnson is the candidate running against John James. And let's go now to the John James watch party, where 13 on your side's Peter Elliott is, and the vibe there, the mood there tonight, Peter.
Certainly more buoyant, Juliet, than it might be over at the Perry Johnson watch party out there in Troy. A lot of people excited. Currently right now massing around the stage here. I'll have you take a look there. We are anticipating John James to potentially speak at some point in the coming minutes. We don't have an exact time, but as you and Josh have certainly discussed, the results in John James's favor so far. The AP results give him a substantial lead so far, so it really looks like it's only a matter of minutes until this race is called in John James's favor. We are seeing campaign signs being passed out, other memorabilia around. As people are getting closer and closer to the stage, there are not a whole lot of seats here. There's a table right in front of me and a handful of others, but a lot of people are standing up, anticipating John James to take the stage there at some point. Other staffers are getting set. We've seen them adjusting the lecterns there where some of his speech will be loaded into, but people are still here having a good time as this music is blaring. People at the bar still as well. It is 10:12. We've talked about maybe being here later on in the day, but with the way the polling was indicating this race, it looked like this race would be called relatively early on in the night. John James had such an overwhelming lead here in the polls, all of them indicating that he would take this race. His name recognition there, of course, his endorsement from President Trump. That is what has borne out so far on some of the polling we have seen. Certainly in Detroit, he has ramped up the numbers in this area and in the 10th congressional district. So we'll see what happens here. At some point, we are expecting him to take the stage. When he does, we will take that speech for you here on 13 on your side. For now, reporting at his watch party in Sterling Heights, an excited fan base of John James supporters. I'm Peter Elliott, 13 on your side.
All right, Peter, thank you. We want to update you now on that U.S. Senate race, the Democratic primary. Nick Nelson is at Abdul El-Sayed's watch party. And Nick, what's the mood there?
Yeah, Juliet, the mood remains high here at Abdul El-Sayed's watch party as he continues to maintain a lead. I want to show you a little bit of what the crowd is looking like behind me. You can still see hundreds of Abdul El-Sayed supporters here continuing to mingle about, occasionally giving out the cheer when they look at some of the results that are coming in from the U.S. Senate race, where, as I said, Abdul El-Sayed continues to maintain a lead, as well as some of the Metro Detroit U.S. House races that are also getting some excitement from some of the supporters that have gathered here as well. As we said, he remains on top. It is still, however, very early in the race. There still isn't even 30% of the vote in statewide, so there is still a lot of vote to go. So there are still a lot of unanswered questions as to what kind of ballots are being counted right now, and in what areas we can look at maybe where some candidates are doing better. I can can say right now, in the Grand Rapids area and the Kent County area, that's where Abdul El-Sayed is continuing to lead over a few points with Haley Stevens. Haley Stevens actually doing better in kind of the metropolitan Detroit area, in places like Oakland County, as well as Wayne County, where she holds kind of a slight lead right now. So we are still waiting on quite a few votes. As Josh mentioned, some of these counties may take some time before we learn exactly what's going on with those. I have spoken with some campaign officials who say that they are waiting for Abdul El-Sayed to take the stage. We are hearing a number of applause here as people kind of it's reassured on some of the screens here that Abdul El-Sayed continues to stay in the lead. Again, we spoke with some campaign officials who said they will let us know whenever Abdul El-Sayed may take the stage here tonight. So once we know when he'll be speaking, we will bring that to you. But for now, reporting live, Nick Nelson, 13 on your side.
Thank you. And we are looking at the latest numbers from the AP. They do show El-Sayed ahead 51% to 45%. We want to bring in now our social media expert, Dr. Danielle Leake of Johns Hopkins University. And Dr. Leake, you're hearing this about El-Sayed, and we've been talking about the progressive candidate, the young vote. What are you seeing now based on these numbers and what we're seeing on social media tonight?
Well, we do know that there is still a lot of excitement on social media, but also a lot of anxiety as we're watching these numbers go back and forth, closer and closer. Some concern that maybe there's still a race to be had between the two candidates, and also some anxiety about whether or not the influencers who are showing up at the party might have a negative impact if El-Sayed does win this primary election. As you know, he's had a few content creators and influencers who are contributing to this sense that he may not be able to do so well in a general election. So we're seeing some chatter about that on the actual platforms. It'll be interesting to see what happens and who he keeps by his side if he wins tonight.
Let's talk more about the influencers because, you know, that's what people are listening to. That's what people are looking at. Once again, it could be a good thing or a bad thing if you're an influencer.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if you're the influencer, I think you are definitely enjoying tonight. There's a lot of attention happening for people online. And those numbers, those engagement numbers just keep going up. But if you're the candidate, I think there's some increasing concern about whether or not that attention on who you have by your side and who you've let into your house is going to be a negative for you if you happen to win the race. I mean, we know that prior to the race that El-Sayed, as we've mentioned before, the campaign did everything they could to try to scrub social media, past social media posts, taking down some statements that were pretty controversial but have come back and have been talked about a lot in recent weeks. I think it's going to be interesting to see what comes out in the general election if he does win.
And, you know, nonetheless, like his strategy to get the younger voter as a progressive candidate, if he does win, how does that translate into November?
Well, I mean, I think one thing that we'll see is the continued, authentic self, admitting that we all have to be who we are and accept who we are, and that we have to be willing to acknowledge that sometimes we do things that we're that we may not always be proud of. That's part of what he's been all about throughout this race. And I think we'll see those kinds of authentic statements on social media. But I also think we're going to see a little bit more careful, held to the vest attention about who he spends time with. We might see we may see fewer of the let's create video at a pool party type posts. We might see a little bit more professional attention to the types of content that goes live in the general election.
And if Haley Stevens should win the race, what would her approach be in November on social media?
Well, that's a great question. I think that if she wants to see the kind of turnout that she'll need in order to win in the general election, she may have to take a play from her current opponent's book. And I think she's really going to strive to try to build bridges with younger voters and try to make a case online for why they need to be willing to turn out in her favor.
Dr. Danielle Leake, thank you so much for your insight. Johns Hopkins University, formerly of Grand Valley State University. We'll check in with you later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaking of Haley Stevens, we want to go back to her watch party right now on the east side of the state. Reporter Steve Iwanek joins us now live with an update there. Are you seeing any more movement yet, Steve?
Well, Juliet, not too much movement. It's been about the same as when we checked back in with you all about an hour ago. However, I did just speak with a staffer who did tell me that they are expecting no later than about midnight that the Congresswoman would be available and she would be coming up to the stage to talk to her supporters and the media tonight. Not exactly sure how the context of that speech would go, obviously. We're still learning the results as we go along, but it still could be a little bit longer so we hear from the Congresswoman. However, you keep looking at the data. I know you guys are constantly checking in on those results, but as every couple of minutes go by, we just start seeing here from the Stevens camp a little bit, incrementally at a time, the gap is starting to shrink a little bit. She's doing pretty well in some of our bigger counties here in Michigan, at least in the early polling so far. And you can hear every time a new result comes in, some of the people out in the hotel lobby area, her supporters, get a little bit fired up because they know that maybe this could be an interesting race after all. And it really has been an interesting race over the course of the last few weeks. It's been heated at certain points of this contest. But, you know, we saw at the very beginning when the polls closed, Abdul El-Sayed had a pretty substantial margin over Stevens, but Stevens has built back in here. So I'm curious to see over the next hour or so when we reach you all at 11 o'clock, what does the situation look like here? Does Stevens gain more confidence? Does she take a lead in some important counties? But we'll have to just wait and see on that. But as of right now, we have not heard from the Congresswoman. But as I said before, a staffer told me that we should expect to hear from her by around midnight. So we'll just strap in, keep our eyes on those results, and bring that latest information to you as soon as we learn more. Back to you guys.
Latest results. We are getting some more county by county, so let's go back to our political reporter, Josh Albertus.
Yeah, what we are seeing, Juliet, is the continuation of what we've been seeing for the last hour or so. The colors continue to fill in. This is, again, the U.S. Senate race on the Democratic side. The purplish color is representing where Abdul El-Sayed, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, is currently leading in those counties, while the tealish color is representing where Congresswoman Haley Stevens is leading. You see a lot of variety here, a lot of differentiation, quite a bit of different shades of each of those two colors. But what we currently see is a lead by a few percentage points for Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, and that's because while you see a lot of these different colors filling in the map, that's not necessarily, you know, it doesn't equate to vote share. So we actually see how many ballots are counted in each county. That's what these bubbles represent. So a lot of those counties you just saw had pure colors in them. They also are a lot of counties that do not have a lot of votes reported yet. So what we are seeing is a lot of reports out of some of the larger, more urban areas, such as a place like Washtenaw County, where we said Dr. Abdul El-Sayed was expected to do more well than the Congresswoman if he wanted to show well statewide with that college, that younger voting population at U of M Ann Arbor, and for other reasons as well. While the biggest bubble you currently see here in terms of results that have been returned is from Oakland County, the Congresswoman's home ground. That is where her congressional district is based, and you see that is the largest bubble of voters that has been returned so far, and that seems to be the buoy of Congresswoman Stevens' continued campaign right now. You are seeing she is leading in Oakland County with most of the expected vote in right now, about 73% in Oakland County, and she is leading there by but just a few thousand votes. So we're going to see if that changes, because right now that is not enough to offset the other purples that we see in terms of El-Sayed's lead in places like Washtenaw County, Livingston, Macomb, and here in Kent County as well, with about a quarter of the expected votes returned, with Dr. Abdul El-Sayed leading with about 54% of the vote. Now, the wild card, again, as you heard one of our experts say earlier, and as we've been talking about tonight, is this what is right now a very small bubble in Wayne County. That is where Detroit is, the largest pot of expected Democratic votes of the night. If you go again to the uncounted votes of the night, That is the largest bubble we still have to see in terms of where are those votes going to go. We don't know, and those are all going to come out of Wayne County, a large share of them. But I did see just before I switched over that bubble got a little bit larger in terms of things that have been reported in Wayne County. A big vote dump there in just the last few seconds or so. About 21% of the vote in Wayne County, and Haley Stevens has pulled ahead by about 36% of the vote. About 23,000 votes ahead of Dr. Abdul El-Sayed in Wayne County, where we are expecting to see where that goes. Has that changed the state of the race? Very much. There is a very small difference now between Congresswoman Haley Stevens at this point, with about a third of the expected statewide vote in. She is trailing El-Sayed by about 0.2% statewide. So as it was suggested earlier, Wayne County can change things in a minute. So we are going to see where the rest of Wayne County goes and where the rest of these larger populations, like in places like Kent and Oakland and Macomb, those outstanding votes, where do they go as well? We want to be keeping our eyes on that. Of course, when we go over to the governor's race, which we are also watching, especially on the Republican side, the Democratic side has been projected by the Associated Press for Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. She is projected by the AP to win the Democratic nomination for governor, but when it comes to the Republican nomination for governor, you are still seeing the race play out there. The red representing where Congressman John James, who was endorsed by President Donald Trump, where he is leading in those counties, and the greenish yellowish color representing where Perry Johnson is leading. And you see that John James is at this point, with the votes that have been returned, solidifying leads in places like still very big pot of votes for the Republican Party that are expected in a place like Wayne County and Oakland County. With a lot of those results in, he is leading at about 52% of the vote. And in Macomb County, that is his congressional district, the majority of his congressional district, that is where he is leading as well. When we take a look at where these votes are coming from, similar story. Most of them are coming out of Oakland County right now, with about 72% of the vote in so far. That is the big dump that we have seen. This, not so much. Wayne County is still very small. We got that big dump in the last few minutes on the Democratic Senate side. We have not seen that from the AP's reporting in the GOP governor's race. So we're still waiting to see how that will play out as well. But certainly Oakland County buoying the congressman's lead at the moment, as statewide, if we look at the statewide results, with about a quarter of the expected vote in, Congressman James is leading with about 50.2% of the vote, about half of the vote. We are going to continue to watch these results come in. We're going to continue to watch and see what role a place like Wayne County, will play in this race. We're going to keep seeing that play out as those results are returned. But for now, we're going to take a quick break, regroup, and we'll be back in a minute as we continue with our live analysis.
And we do have Associated Press calling another race. It is in the Republican primary for governor. Do we have the numbers handy? There we do. Associated Press is calling the race for John James, 50% to Perry Johnson, 36%. Our Peter Elliott has been at that campaign watch party tonight with John James. So we're going to join him now live. And Peter, have you...
Juliet, I think I missed your question there, if that was a question there, but I can at least speak to the mood here, which has certainly been elevated over the last few minutes as word starts to trickle out that John James will be, as predicted by the Associated Press, the nominee, the Republican nominee for governor here in the state of Michigan. You can see people looking down at their phones. I've seen them all looking at the same AP map that we're looking at, that Josh has reported, that you just mentioned there, Juliet, looking at the polling that has come in, going heavy for John James. You can see particularly on the east side, that is heavy towards John James. Of course, is expected to be sort of his stronghold, strong area by a lot of pollsters here. The energy has been high all night, of course, going off of those polls that predicted John James, the congressman, the two-term congressman from the 10th district, would be the winner here. And now you can kind of see it trickle out here, this news. We are told that he will be speaking in the next 5 minutes or so. We've been told it'll be imminent for the last couple minutes, so we'll take his team at their word there that he will be coming out shortly. But either way, this crowd of supporters here is having a good time. He could be coming out 30 minutes from now and they'd still be having a good time. The music's still blaring. Hopefully you can hear me here. But a strong showing here from John James in this Republican gubernatorial primary. He will go on to face Jocelyn Benson, the Secretary of State on the Democratic side. That'll be an interesting race come November as this Republican primary has really tacked towards the right. Who supports President Trump more? John James having the endorsement of President Trump. Jocelyn Benson isn't a candidate like we've seen in that U.S. Senate race, not as progressive as Abdul El-Sayed, probably not as moderate as Haley Stevens, perhaps somewhere in the middle. Both those candidates have pretty high name recognition. This is something that both of you talked about over the course of the night. Jocelyn Benson has served many years in office. John James as well, both 2 terms in Congress and major high-profile runs for statewide office, U.S. Senate in 2018, U.S. Senate in 2020. People are clapping here. They are chomping at the bit for John James to come out. And it looks like he should be coming out potentially in a moment here. For now, Juliet, I'll throw it back to you before we await his imminent arrival at the podium behind us.
All right. Thank you so much, Peter. And if we can look at those numbers once again, Associated Press calls the race for John James for the Republican primary for governor. As we are looking at right now, the official numbers are 26%, but based on what Associated Press is seeing, John James, 50% of the vote. Perry Johnson, 36%. As you just heard Peter Elliott say, we are expecting John James to address his supporters any minute now. We're also hearing that Perry Johnson is expected to address his campaign watch party in a few moments as well. Right now, let's go back to you, Josh, and see what are you seeing from these numbers, and especially in this governor's race?
Yeah, you saw that projection behind me as it came up just a few minutes ago, but election night has a way of drawing you in, but now we are seeing it clearly that the AP has called John James as the winner of the Republican gubernatorial primary for Michigan. So what is really driving that victory? Well, it's what we've seen throughout the night. The biggest bubble there. I've been talking about bubbles for many minutes now. The Oakland County is just such a buoy for John James at the moment. And I say at the moment as if 73% of the expected vote was not in a place like Oakland County. So he is about 17 points ahead in this very, very large voter share for the Republican Party. He is ahead in many of these larger population centers in a place like Kent County, in a place like Washtenaw County, in a place like Macomb County. He has leads in all of those places with votes still expected, and we are still expecting a lot of vote out of a place like Wayne County, where about 2% of the expected votes in this race had been shown at this point. But the AP has called it, and the AP has projected that Perry Johnson will not be able to surpass that lead in a place like Oakland County, in a place like the other counties that we are seeing in favor of John James at the moment. So that is the latest major call that we have gotten in this state at this point in the night. We are still waiting. We are hearing that the Congressman James may be expected to speak soon, but we are still waiting for results in another very, very big race in this state right now, which of course is still continuing to be the Democratic primary for U.S. Senate. And as I've said throughout the night, a very large variety of colors between the green of Haley Stevens and the magenta of Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, and those continue to file in. But whether or not those votes are going to continue to play out that way, with the number of ballots that are expected to be uncounted that are not counted yet, but are expected to come in a place like Wayne County with that gigantic circle of expected uncounted votes, how that will sway the race. We've already seen at least one dump from Wayne County very much shake up the dynamic of this race so far, and whether that has continued is something to be seen. About 36% of expected votes counted, and we have what is still a pretty tight race at this point, within only a few percentage points, with Dr. Abdul El-Sayed leading with about 50% of the vote to about 56.5% for Congresswoman Haley Stevens statewide, and we are seeing her with a larger margin in the all-important pot of Wayne County and Detroit votes for the Democratic Party. That is a very important voter base for the Democratic Party, and we are seeing her pull ahead there, but that is still only about a quarter of the expected votes are in at this point. So whether that lead holds is really going to be one of the biggest questions of the night at this point, and whether or not we continue to see that, and whether or not that makes a difference in whether or not she's to overcome Dr. Abdul El-Sayed's lead that he's had throughout the night. She's still being buoyed by a slim margin in her congressional home area of Oakland County, with most of the votes, about 76% of the expected votes, coming in there at this point. We are still waiting, of course, on some of those other large population centers like Kent County, which is about halfway in at this point. Expected votes are in, and a place like Washtenaw County, where we could expect a larger vote share for Dr. Abdul El-Sayed to continue coming in, and how that may balance out some of the other areas that Congresswoman Stevens is pulling ahead right now in a place like Wayne County. So we're going to continue watching that. We're going to continue watching whether these candidates come out to address in the next few minutes. But for now, we're going to turn it over to Juliet with one of our in-studio experts.
John Truscott is here now again. Any surprise about this?
Not a surprise at all. We've watched the Republican primary, and John James just slowly consolidated the vote in the Republican primary. So we saw that coming as other people dropped out. The Trump endorsement just turbocharged that and pretty much finished it off. Not a surprise, but now he has to keep the Republican base. And the key with an election is, how do you grow from the base that you have?
How do you?
It is attraction, you know, how you grow those numbers, and that's what the campaign will be about.
So what do you think with Jocelyn Benson? I mean, what do you see? What's the dynamic? What's going to happen next?
You have really two kind of little more traditional candidates, party organized traditional candidates. I think you're going to probably start talking about debates pretty soon. When are they going to be? How are you going to do them? I think TV time, ad time is going to be really, really expensive, and a lot of it's already bought up, but you're going to see them nonstop across all of your platforms, TV, digital, everything, as they make their case to the voters.
And we've mentioned this before about now the importance of debates, because that's how people are going to learn more about the details of them.
How can you think on your feet? What do you really think when you're questioned and challenged? And I like it when the candidates can challenge each other a little bit back and forth and not just give canned answers. How quick are they on their feet? I think people want to see that they can adapt, they can move and change, and we will see how they do. And
I'm hearing from my producer. Who are we going to right now? Okay, I thought we had somebody coming
Sure.
to address us. We have the 4 campaigns. Let's talk about the U.S. Senate Democratic primary
Yeah.
too. I mean, it's still pretty close, and
closer than any of the pundits were predicting
that's
at
the
this
thing.
point.
It really
Yeah.
is.
I think it is close. Wayne County will determine
yeah.
it. It's the biggest vote, and it's always the latest to come in
Mhm.
because it's so large. But what you'll look at is which towns are coming in later. Is it Detroit or is it Livonia? You know, that makes a big difference in terms of where the vote totals are coming from. This really, I've been seeing a lot of tweets and a lot of material
Yeah.
coming, and people, and what Dr. Leek said is absolutely right. In that things that you have said in the past, they're still out there in the ether, and you can bet the opposition research people have it, and it's going to be trotted out day after day after day. So El-Sayed is going to have some challenges coming with some of his positions and things he said, and I think more importantly, some of the people he's associated with.
Yeah.
Once people know who they are, what they stand for, they're not really supporters of our country. And I can see love of country, love of America, that sort of thing, 250th anniversary, that could all be a theme that really starts to play out and could be more important than ever in this cycle.
And it'll be interesting to see the exact breakdown of numbers from West Michigan.
Yeah.
You know, he held the big rally here. He had his supporters, Bernie Sanders, AOC. You know, how did that play out in this?
West Michigan has changed a lot in the last several cycles. It's not a solid Republican area anymore, although you get to Ottawa County, it's a little more solid. But, you know, in the Democratic primary, it has become West Michigan, Kent County has become a lot more influential. You see candidates really paying a lot more attention because there are a lot of vote totals to drive out of here. And it will be a very important area for the general election.
How about the rest of statewide tonight? Because I know we've hardly talked about anything else because we've been concentrating
Yeah.
on the Senate and the governor. Anything else that you have observed tonight that you want to share with us?
I'm really interested in what's happened with some of the legislative primaries, and I haven't seen any of them yet.
Yeah.
They've been
Yeah, we
drowned
have-
out
yeah,
by
I
everything.
know.
But you know, control of the legislature, the legislative majorities are very, very thin for both parties,
Right.
House and Senate. So that really, the prognosticators are saying Jocelyn Benson will win. It's too early. A lot of things happen in the next couple of months. But the legislature is still very, very important to the future of Michigan, and seeing how those will shake out will be, I think, a tomorrow morning sort of thing.
Yeah, it sure will be.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
You're
for your
very
insight,
welcome.
John. And we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, we know the governor's race for November, the election. It is Jocelyn Benson and John James. We are told that John James is coming out to address. You can see a lot of movement going on there, Peter.
Yeah, a lot of loud cheers here, of course, as John James is set to come out. We told you he would be coming out for the last few minutes here, 5 minutes ago, probably 20 minutes ago, but finally you can hear We Are the Champions playing right now by Queen. He's still not appeared to take the stage just yet, but other members of his campaign supporters have amassed behind him at the podium where he will be speaking. We have an announcement. Listen in.
Of you and 10 million other Michiganders, we are going to fix this state together.
Our Republican nominee and the next governor of Michigan, my husband, John James.
Thank you, and always, I want to thank Almighty God for every blessing in my life, for each opportunity, and for each one of you. Everything that we have comes from Him. I also want to thank my incredible wife, Liz. They are the reason why I fight so hard for Michigan's future. Thank you for your sacrifices. I love you all. And I also want to thank President Trump for his endorsement, his president. And his steadfast belief in the American people. And to every volunteer and supporter who poured your time, energy, and prayers for this cause, this victory belongs to you. The primary is over. Now we come together. One team, one fight, one mission to save Michigan. For those who supported me, thank you. And for those who did not, I'm going to work every single day to earn your trust. And to every Michigander who feels politically homeless, who loves the state, works hard, and believes in common sense and wonders whether anyone in government still sees you, I see you. I'm for you. Tonight marks the beginning of Michigan's comeback, but we have to be honest about where we are. Michigan's families are paying some of the highest gasoline prices in the West. Our unemployment rates among the highest in America. Our children are falling behind. Our infrastructure is crumbling, and too many of our young people are leaving to find opportunity somewhere else. Don't worry. The Democrats just blame Trump because they think he'll fall for it. But we're smarter than that. Here's the truth. The president's occupied the White House for less than half the time that Benson's held power in Lansing. For nearly 8 years, Johnson Benson's been a part of the Michigan Democratic leadership. For 2 full years under President Biden, Democrats had a trifecta in Lansing. They have the power. They passed their agenda. Now they're spending roughly $20 billion more than Michigan spent at the height of COVID. Our state budget's nearly 50% larger than it was under Governor Snyder. Does your child's school feel 50% better? How about you? How about your health care? How about your damn roads? Michigan now ranks 46th out of 50 states overall. 46th! That's 11 spots worse than California. We rank 45th in education, 43rd in our economy, 42nd in our infrastructure. Our fourth graders rank 44th in reading. 45 states are doing better than Michigan, and every one of them has the same president we do. Jocelyn Benson promises a new direction, but she's been a part of the leadership that got us lost in the first place. Now she's teaming up with Abdul El-Sayed and Midwest Mount County to impose a socialist agenda that's never worked anywhere it's been tried. Look, Michigan does not lack talent. We do not lack resources, but Michigan lacks proven, tested leadership where it matters the most.
And you are watching John James, the winner of the GOP Republican primary for governor, thanking his supporters and giving a victory speech. At the same time, his opponent, Perry Johnson, is also making a concession speech. We have much more coverage coming up at 11 o'clock. Live reports from 4 different campaign parties in Detroit, as well as the results and reaction coming up at 11 o'clock. We'll see you then.